Hello, welcome to episode 8 of Eade IT, where we talk about questions that are posed from the audience. And Rick Rosner and I, who Rick will join me in a moment, get a chance to talk about the answers. If there are answers, you'll get our perspective on what those are. But the main reason that I'm running this show, I'm the author of No Blame, No Shame, and the book prior to that was called Freedom, and it was part of my recovery from addiction. And so you'll see this scrolling across the bottom of your screen. That's where you can write to us with a question of your own. Info at airu.tv. And AirU stands for Addicts in Recovery United, because every human being has the potential and power to recover from their addiction, whatever it is. I've met people from all walks of life and all sorts of addictions, and they're so much happier in recovery. And addiction is a disease that affects the whole family. All your loved ones suffer as well. And to ease the pain and suffering is the purpose of the show, to carry the message of recovery. And also, if you want to see previous episodes of the show, please go to airu.tv. The website contains all of the previous episodes and episodes from past shows that we have run, and Rick has also been featured on those. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to try to bring Rick on right now. Good morning,
Hello.
Rick. It's morning in the West Coast here. We're both in California. I'm in Northern California. You're in Southern California. And you have a question from
From
someone?
Naomi Cometto, Kim, I guess that's how you say it, from Windsor, Ontario,
Oh,
who
okay.
asks, what happens after we die?
What happens after we die? Now, that is a question that people have pondered for ages.
Mhm.
And would you like to take the first stab at what happens when we die?
Well, yeah, I mean, humans have been around for, I don't know, depending, you can Google it, but maybe 100,000 years, depending on when you make the cutoff between humans and other primates. And then we've had language and some version of civilization, I don't know, for 8, 10,000 years. um, and for most of that, of the civilization time, I don't know, before we had language, I don't know that I don't know how they would have decided, any kind of theology. But for most of the time that we've had civilization and language, people turn to religion for the answer to that question. But in the past 200, 300 years, science has squeezed out mystical answers, pushed them out of the way, made them seem less plausible. And there's seems to be less room in the world for, if you believe in science, at least, for religious answers to that question. Um, and I mean, there's a thing called the God of the gaps, which is you can still believe in God and a creator and religious stuff, but only in the places where science hasn't planted its flags, and those gaps get smaller and smaller. So, and I'm pretty sciency, so I tend to think that once you're dead, that's it. That the information in your consciousness is obliterated as your brain, loses oxygen because you're dead, and then decays.
Interesting. Yes. And I agree with you that the theological answers have been the primary ones in the past. And there's all sorts of beliefs, though, even based on theology and religious. For example, people believe in reincarnation, that you've lived many past lives. Um, and when I was growing up, I loved the concept of Valhalla. Yeah, there's, so the Vikings and the Norse belief that if you died in battle, you're going to go to Valhalla. And so there are a lot of religions that people think that the sacrificing yourself in heroic ways, you will be rewarded in an afterlife. and many people believe in heaven and hell. Um, so there are, this is a question of faith more than it is of science, because science has no answer for this. They don't know what happens after you die. Um, my personal belief is that there is a divine spark in all of us. Otherwise, we would not have gained consciousness, and we would not be alive. So I think and you can think of it as a universal life creating force. It doesn't have to be an initial creator of any kind. In my book Freedom, I don't know if I have a copy that I could show you, but I must have it here somewhere. There it is. In my book Freedom, I talk. I dedicated a chapter to the God question, and I thought, what if I think of eternity and infinity. I can't think of a individual, a superior being in those terms, but I can think of energy in those terms. And so I think of the field of eternal energy. And we know from science that where there's energy, there's matter. And that matter, as we talked before, when the atoms or the subatomic nucleus is split apart and fused together, all sorts of energy is released, and there may be many, many, many big bangs throughout history. Most of them will collapse upon themselves. Some of them will expand. So I believe it. And in some of those that expand, then there will be the creation of life force. Then the life force will create entities of all various manifestations. I mean, compared to humans, the dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years, or roamed the earth for millions of years. And so we're just a little blink on the time frame.
So,
And
yeah, you touched on a couple things. I do believe in superior beings, but I don't believe in gods. And by that, I mean the Milky Way galaxy. Our galaxy has about 10 to the 11th stars, which is
unimaginably huge number.
like it's like 100 billion stars. Most of those stars, almost every star is part of a solar system. It has planets. And then there are about 100 billion galaxies in the visible universe. So if you do the math, that's about 10 to the 22nd stars, almost all of them with planets. So I think it's highly likely that even if intelligent life only arises in 1 in a billion, on 1 in a billion stars, planets, or 1 in 10 billion, that's still, I think if I do the math right, that's 10 to the 12th, which is, I think, there's a trillion. There are a trillion places where intelligent life has arisen, even if it's only a 1 in 10 billion thing. Um, and some of those places, maybe life has come and gone. Maybe, they blew themselves up. Maybe they decided it wasn't worth it. But on a lot of planets, like I would guess that, once civilization becomes established, that maybe it can hang out, maybe it can persist for 1 million years, 2 million years. And, we've had civilization for 8 or 10,000 years. The civilization that would exist, after 2 million years would be, those beings would be incredibly advanced and powerful. And they're
Right.
not gods and they're not our creators, but um, I would think that there's a decent chance they exist. I don't think there's much of a chance given the distances um, between stars that the civilizations are sending, ships out to check us out. That I mean, you look what's happened to us in recent history. When we were kids, space was super exciting.
Yes.
And now we're less excited by space and more excited by our personal space on our phones. And I would I would think that any powerful civilization would, instead of spending the effort to, colonize the galaxy, they might stay closer to home and just do more computation. That's what we're doing with AI, with our phones. Is we're just doing a lot of computation for the purpose. A lot of it is for entertainment. Some of it's for communication. Um,
And AI will be much better at it than humans are. So
yeah, but why spend millions of years traveling to distant stars? Because to travel anywhere close to the speed of light is logistically just nearly impossible. Because if you're traveling at any decent speed, if you run into a piece of dust, that has the kinetic energy of a nuclear weapon. So you have to figure out how to push everything out. Anyway, it's
yeah,
I
yeah,
would
right,
think that a powerful civilization could simulate any possible kind of life on other planets and wouldn't have to personally travel there. Now, there might be other reasons to travel across the galaxy, to escape, say your star is burning out or it's going to go nova, or you're escaping, a collapsing star. But
right.
just to check us.
Superman did.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, not really, because he doesn't exist. But um, anyway, but also,
Superman doesn't exist.
all right. Well,
Yeah,
the question of what happens after we die, even if you're, or especially if you're sciency, is changing, because within a couple, civilization, humans have been around 100,000 years, civilization 10,000 years. But in the next 200 years, we're going to be able to cheat death for quite a while. That there's no question that people who are alive in the year 2300, if civilization hasn't wiped itself out,
right,
will have the option to live indefinitely, either in their bodies, you just keep getting them patched, or in artificial bodies.
right.
Um,
Well, and so what you're talking about is the consciousness of the
yeah,
individual. But I do believe, in terms of our universe, there is creation, existence, and there will be destruction. People talk about a big crunch following the Big Bang. That it will expand to a point and then contract and maybe start all over. But who knows? My thinking is that we're in the existence stage of our universe. And as you point out, the distances are kind of hard, very difficult to hold into your mind.
well, the closest star is 4 light years away.
Yeah, and so and even if you do the math as you did earlier and about the possibility of life, it's improbable that it's in our galaxy, but it's probable that it is in some galaxy.
So in our galaxy, I think I mean, we have 100 billion stars. So I think there's a really good chance
You really think so?
at least life on other planets, and a fair chance of intelligent civilizations. Because I don't think it's a 1 in 10 billion thing. It's not super likely, because you need, they call it I think the temperate zone, where you
Right,
need to be at a distance from your star where
right.
water can exist in all
And
phases.
there are many stars that are red giants or white dwarfs that would not support life at all.
Right,
So,
you need a place for life to walk around on, or at least to support an
and you
ocean.
can't be too close to the star because then you'll burn up, and you can't be too far because then it's too cold. So that sweet spot that you're talking about, Earth is in it, for example.
Yeah, and I think they're finding all sorts of new planets, and what they're finding is that
Life,
it's not the most common situation that you have a rocky planet like ours in the temperate zone. I think you generally find, like the gas giants, that maybe something happened in the history of our solar system, some collision that knocked a rocky planet into the right orbit. I don't know,
Yeah.
but even so, I would think that there would be thousands of planets across, at least across our galaxy, that support life, and a few of those, would have, civilizations.
Okay. Yeah. I even if we disagree about the likelihood in this galaxy, there's so many galaxies.
And 100 billion of them.
So
There's a galaxy out there for every star in our galaxy.
right. These are very the numbers are so huge they boggle the mind. But if you can make the leap of faith that this number is so large that it goes from improbable to probable that the life exists elsewhere. And what form that life takes, who knows? But it's improbable that the only place in the entire universe is Earth that supports life. Certainly, other planets orbiting the sun, their stars in the sweet spot, will support life of some kind. How far it develops, how advanced, probably, I would say, in all probability, there are more advanced civilizations out there, and there are more primitive, if we use that word, life forms as well. So just running the numbers, but this again. So we're getting back to the question of what happens after you die. So is your consciousness preserved? I don't quite think that's the case. I do think that something is preserved because when we get right down to it, it's energy. And when that energy leaves the body is dead. Where does that energy go? Well, the universe will recycle it somehow. Some people believe it'll be recycled into another human body. Some people believe it just dissipates, which is certainly what I believed for the most of my life. But the consciousness that was created is an energetic form, and I think that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we add in the spiritual layer to that, what happens to that spiritual force, that spiritual energy? Now, that spiritual energy may take many different forms. It may dissipate. It may, can't possibly rule it out that it's reincarnated, but I think it's likely that it's transmuted into something else entirely. And whether you're conscious of this life or you're aware, as we are aware of this life, of your next, whatever the next experience is. I can't say. And I think it's unlikely, but I can't say that you would be aware in the same way that we are now. But it could be that if the energy is low, one thing happens. If the energy is strong, another thing happens. And so this gets about to the bottom line of what I think of as raise your spiritual energy as much as you can in this life. And if you can, raise it to a level such as someone like Jesus or someone like Buddha did, and become enlightened, then I think you're going to be connected to other enlightened life forces elsewhere.
So I think, because I'm a science guy for the most part, that over history, especially recent history, science has taken over many of the functions that we used to um, assign to God. God will take care of
Absolutely.
it.
We had to explain the mystery of life. And
Right. But like, and I think eventually, I think in the near future, technology will give us extended life that we used to turn to God for. So now we're transmuted every frickin' morning,
it
where,
sells.
where we wake up, and I think a lot of people believe that consciousness resides entirely in the brain, and a little bit in your body, because you're getting, there are nerves that run, but there's not some mystical other kind of like, magic juice factory that's piping in that it's all happening in here.
Yes, I
but
believe that too.
but our brains they they don't have 100% fidelity. We forget most of the things we experience. And every time we wake up, where we reconstitute our awareness, and there's a lot of stuff that is missing from the day before and all the days before that, but we're okay with that because that's, we've been conscious in this forgetful way for our entire lives. It doesn't really bug us until our system of awareness really starts breaking down, like with Alzheimer's. Then that's very distressing. But our normal level of crappy consciousness, we're fine with that. My wife bugged me for the last couple of years. She thinks that my hearing is bad, and I had it tested, and it's not great, but it's not terrible. But I find she finally talked me into getting a Costco hearing aid for just one ear because I wasn't willing to. And so I put it in, and I
Compromise.
could hear a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't otherwise hear. And in a way, it's expanded awareness.
Yes.
And it's nice. Like right now, I have one fairly new contact in and one fairly old contact, and it's very annoying because this eye is all blurry. After we're done, I'm gonna have to throw away the contact, put in a fresh one. But having a blunted awareness, it reduces some of the joy in life. One of my grandpas made it to 96 and a half. And one of the reasons that he gave up at that point was his dentures broke. He used to have well-fitting dentures, and he went to the and they cracked, they get old. And he went to the VA and they gave him a new set, and they didn't fit right. They hurt. And so he lost the joy of eating, and he'd already lost the joy of, his hearing was probably crappy. His vision was probably,
Yep.
he used to like to, in the afternoon, watch TV and maybe get a little drunk. And one afternoon, he accidentally dropped his old school TV, not the new flat screen, on his head. And, he was injured. They had to drill holes in his skull to let out some of the pressure. And so
Right.
he wasn't allowed to drink anymore. So all his joys went away and his sensory acuity. So we're okay, we're okay with our with what our senses, our sensation, we like being alive. And you were talking about whether in the future we're going to replicate consciousness, and in the future it will be crappy, and people will be like, I don't know, is it freaking worth it to live in some crappy ass Minecraft world, badly, constructed virtual reality with these shitty new senses? That some people will be like, I guess this is me. I guess this janky freaking crap version of myself
If it's
is
all you don't have anything to compare it
yeah,
to.
and people be like, I guess this is a decent continuation of my consciousness, but other people will say, not really. It's only got 80% fidelity. There's so much stuff that didn't make it when your brain was uploaded. By the way, there's a show about this, a comedy by the creator of The Office called Upload on Amazon, which is about a near future where people can do this, and it addresses a lot of these issues in a way that's more fun than the way we're doing it.
Well, again, it's down to the question of what is consciousness. And I do believe that you can raise your consciousness. And what do I mean by that? I mean that it's the awareness. And I think the awareness is key. And I really agree with you about the sensory deprivation and how I can go on a walk 100 times and pay no attention to my surroundings. But I've gotten in the habit of every morning in my morning walk, it's usually dark out, no cars, very quiet. And I will say, look at the world through the eyes of an artist. And I can't see that much, but I can see certain things. And all of a sudden I see things in a completely different light. Because I look at the world, many people look at the world as it is. But many people, such as myself, look at the world through filters and usually mood dependent. And when I look at the world through the eyes of an artist, I'm suddenly so much more aware of my surroundings. And whether you're a painter or a sculptor or whatever, you're creating something. And this gives me the feeling not only of creation, but of connectedness, that I'm not alone in this world, even if no one else is around me.
So I'm writing a novel about the near future. And in this novel, I just came up with a character. Her name's Riley. She's 19 years old, and she had a chunk of her brain blown out of her head in a mass shooting at a pool party in Houston. And this evil and semi-evil, industrialist comes in and says, we can restore you. And the family, makes a deal with him, and they rebuild the missing parts of her brain, and the industrialist makes her what I call a sense queen, where he gives her that expanded consciousness that you're talking about, that when for us to do it, we have to concentrate. We have to go out into nature and we have to look at the shape of leaves and the sun coming through. Like, it's crazy. Like, every tree has a different strategy for capturing sunlight, a different way the leaves like lay, and
it's fascinating.
Yeah. And so, but she doesn't have to work at it. When her brain is reconstructed, she's like constantly having a sense of wonder about the world around her. And she's like, what the heck is this? Why? And he's like, well, because, this is a product here. We're going to, we're selling you. And if you are constantly transfixed by the world and loving it, then you're our brand ambassador.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I remember one writer, Stefan Zweig, was with Rodin, and he said that he was having this deep conversation with Rodin, and then Rodin saw something on one of his sculptures that he was working on, and then he started to change the sculpture, and he said, Schwartz said that Rodin forgot he was there. He was concentrating so deeply into what he was doing. And he was surprised when he turned around and there he was, even though they had just been in a deep conversation.
So I do a show like this with my buddy Lance, who's a painter and a sculptor.
Uh-huh.
And, he has moments like that where, a sculpture, especially if clay is one thing, and then marble is another freaking thing. It takes a long time. And yeah, it when you get down to the end and your work, it's very absorbing. Unfortunately, his companion tends to be conservative podcasts. So he works 8-10 hours a day at his art, but he's filling his head with conservative nonsense. And the world of conservative punditry and podcasts and news, it's all very cohesive. Trump does something, and the conservatives all kind of take it, and then they roll it around until, like, whatever it is, they come up with a way to spin it.
And it's carried on show after show after show.
Right, and but like that the talking points and
right.
The analysis of why what Trump did is a good thing. It's like a ball in improv, zip zap zop. It's passed around all these conservatives, and it becomes a very smooth product.
Right.
So Lance has, like, I do a show and I had to shut it down because it was just bumming me out too much, and we have to revamp it where we're going to come back better with less politics, because I can't out argue Lance because his head is filled with very cohesive arguments and factoids that support his side, and I don't have that.
Hmm. Well, it's also, I have found that for me, it's instead of trying to get my point across and be understood, it was better for me to just understand and to meet people what they're at and say what they can hear. And because I'm not going to convince someone like that of my point of view. So it leads to less conflict and it leads to, a connection to another human being that I otherwise would have shut down.
Right. I've
And
been friends with Lance for
yeah,
35 years,
so
and
that's
he's except for his political stuff, he's a
right.
great guy
There
with
you go. Right.
a ton of knowledge about art and history.
Yeah.
And if you can stay away from the Trumpy crap, we can have good. His dad, he's got a ton of Hollywood stories. His dad created the Pink Panther. When when
Whoa.
when my buddy grew up on the Lance grew up on in movie studios where at 2 years old he has a memory of sitting on David Niven's lap
Uh,
and driving a car. They were driving around. David Niven was letting him think he was driving the car. David Niven was this old time, super charming British actor who was
oh,
nice to this little kid.
yeah, and I remember David Niven in a unfortunate way for me was because I loved the Thin Man movies with David Niven in Myrna Loy.
Okay, yeah.
Total crush on Myrna Loy. But David Niven could have multiple martinis and still be charming and witty.
Yeah, but
And
my mom's middle name was Myrna because my grandma loved, at least liked the name off of Myrna Loy.
yeah, yeah. She was wonderful. Again, one of my earliest crushes, and David Niven was absolutely charming. But he could down countless martinis without effect. So martini became one of my favorite drinks, much to
Oh,
my detriment.
it's certainly the coolest drink you can
That's
drink.
what I thought. I would say I wasn't just a drunk; I was a classy drunk.
So your one of your addictions was alcohol.
Yes, yes, that was the almost took my life. Yes.
I'm glad you are in recovery from it.
Yes, yes. Well,
So,
thank you.
so
It is one of those things where the numbing effect was very good for anxiety up to a point, and until the consequences became much more severe, and I was in denial about the consequences and what toll they were taking until it was life threatening, and I could no longer deny it. And so I did something about it.
so different things run in different families, and my family doesn't tend to have addictions, but we have OCD, which
Yes.
is a different way to, but I mean, serves the same purpose to address anxiety.
Right.
So I tend to like to enter across a threshold with my right foot. I prefer turning clockwise to counterclockwise. My dad carried 40 pens. Had OCD about pens, and he had 10 pens in every pocket of his jacket. He was obsessed with everything at a right angle. I'm obsessed with going to the gym.
Right.
I go to the gym 5 times a day, and then I go. I belong to various gyms, and I'll go doink this gym and then the next gym. And actually, that's not a terrible. At least, I mean, it's not the worst OCD thing to have. And also, like people in gyms now are freaking dicks. They sit there on their phones. You want to get on a machine, and no, they're sitting there good, just like and
Gabbing
in,
away.
instead of me being dickish to them about them being, I can say, all right, I'm not going to be able to use the machine here, but at my next gym, I can use it. So it's
Good for you. That is kind of adapting, and that's what humans are good at, is adapting to their environment. Until the environment is threatening
it's not, I mean, with anything that is not perfectly at,
a right angle.
well, no, I mean, that doesn't like respond to your environment. Like when you're dealing with an obsession or an addiction, you're not acting in your own best interests always. Like
That's absolutely true.
I had a TV writing job, and one of my quirks or obsessions was I couldn't leave work each day until I turned in 10 pages of material.
Okay.
And this was bad because my boss, now fortunately I had a boss between my between I had a boss under the big boss.
Right.
So he got the material and he's like, what is this crap? What is all this crap?
Right.
And he threw away 80% of it. But if my big boss had ever seen, what all the crap I was, he'd be like, no, in fact, I was fired from another job. I remember kind of for that because it was a quiz show, and we had a quota of, I don't know, 50 questions a day. And I thought, and then it dropped to like, I don't know, actually it wasn't even, it was some, I thought, ridiculously low number, like 20 questions. It was the weakest link, and those questions are not sophisticated or complicated. And I'm like, no, that's 20 is not enough. And I'm like, I'll just write 50, 100 questions a day. And, then they get a bunch of questions. And so I'd write way too many questions.
Right.
And,
well, you're touching on another addiction, which is workaholic, which,
which my dad was.
Which is what you think of in terms of it's a social good, good work. It's a good addiction. No, man, it can ruin families.
No, my dad was at the office 16 hours a day, and then he'd come home and fall asleep on the couch, and it destroyed his marriage.
Yes. And this is an experience that occurs over and over and over again in our society. And one of the things one of the reasons I had this show and others is that people are afraid to talk about it. People think, and in my camp, and my family was Irish Catholic, and I used to think it was just the Irish Catholic, but it turns out no matter who I talk to and what faith they have, this tends to be similar situation where if there's a problem, you don't talk about it. And if you do talk about it, you're the problem. So we learned that not be open about these things. So we end up burying.
So my wife and I have been in, not because we're always yelling at each other, but because we have just ridiculously great insurance that pays for most of it. My wife and I have been in couples counseling for, I don't know, 32 years.
Wow, I've been married for 33.
So we're 34 and a half years married. And
congratulations.
we go about, thank you. It's once a month for an hour. And it's good to have a place where we can talk about, stuff in a refereed environment.
Right. And it's a safe environment. Because that's usually the counselor is very good at creating a safe environment.
My wife, my mom passed away a couple of years, 3 years, and my wife found a bunch of love letters between my parents.
Oh.
And my wife only knew them after when they were long divorced, because that marriage only lasted 5 years. And so she read the letters, and she's writing an epistolary novel around the letters, which requires her to think about what happened between my parents, because they started off wildly in love. Right. And one conclusion that we've reached based on her knowing my dad, knowing me, and reading these letters is that my dad, in addition to having OCD, was on the spectrum. He probably had, we can't call it Asperger's anymore. The reason you can't call it Asperger's, the main reason is Asperger, the guy who discovered it and named it, he was a Nazi in World War II.
Oh, no.
He did terrible shit. So that's why the term Asperger went away. Now it's called, high functioning autism.
Yes.
And we figured,
and being on the spectrum includes that.
Yeah. So we figured that my dad was probably had that deal, but that diagnosis didn't exist in the 50s when my parents were married. If it had, and if they'd been able to talk about it in counseling, it may have helped their relationship survive,
Oh
because
yeah.
he would do shit that, like, annoyed my and that my mom couldn't understand,
Right.
and that seemed, in some instances, malicious, like laughing at the wrong time.
Right.
And
Inappropriate socially. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. There was finally when I realized that I was on the spectrum as well, and that I could understand things that most people couldn't, but I didn't understand things that most people did. And so I could be socially awkward, which would lead to more anxiety. But say something that was inappropriate. I just came back from my 50th uh, uh, high school reunion, and I said something. My best friend was there, and he thought that he told me that it was very inappropriate, and I didn't think so. And it was, oh, thanks for the heads up. So I'm still learning. It's still
yeah,
one of
me
those things.
too. And, like, like, I, for many years, my job was writing jokes,
Mhm.
and my spread of jokes from appropriate to inappropriate was probably bigger than most of the other joke writers, where I couldn't find the line and I'd
Mhm.
go over it. Like, for a while, my nickname at a show was Poo Cooch Jizz, because I was writing too many jokes that involved poop or vaginas or semen. It's like,
Yeah.
and word that you couldn't use. And,
Right.
like, I look back on my history as a person, and I'm like, there's so many times where, like, holy shit, like, what, that's so dumb. And it was, you know, often it was not having a as good an understanding of social rules as I might have wanted.
Right. Yeah, I could very much relate to that. And at some point for me, and this is just my experience, I got frustrated with not understanding things that other people did. And so then I just didn't care. That's what I told myself. I was just going to be me. And I could be authentic, but I could be an authentic jerk.
Yeah, I mean, right. We live in an era of incel culture.
Uh-huh.
Those are guys who, involuntary celibate. That is, you're too creepy to get laid, to get a girlfriend, right? And guys who have just kind of given up. They're like, yeah, that's the case. Girls do not like me. And in the past, when I was younger and trying to get a girlfriend, I'd see guys who weren't cool enough to get a girlfriend, and that was a lot. That was a higher percent. Well, there's a different trends, but back then, girlfriends were for cool guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was less egalitarian than now.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of guys who, and so the guys who, you could go two ways. You could get pissed at girls, fuck them,
Yeah. Right. Right.
or you could get a little pissed at yourself, like, why the heck can I need
What's
to,
wrong with me? Right.
and try to improve yourself. And I went that way, and eventually it mostly worked.
Yes. And this self-awareness is what we're talking about, is getting back to a level of consciousness. And it's also it hasn't served me to judge others and their level of consciousness as much as, and I used to be horribly judgmental and think that they're, so and so's just doesn't get it. And so now when I say it, meet people where they're at, whatever level their consciousness is at, I can click onto it, I can connect to it, and deal with it, as long as it's nothing too um, gross or outrageous. There are people that I've I call it addition by subtraction. It's just it adds to my life by leaving them out of it. And
Yeah.
so
One of the gyms I go to is Planet Fitness, and one of their slogans is they have it in letters this big on the wall: no judgment.
yeah,
So when I'm there, I'm like, let's see if I can not judge these people. And depending, sometimes I make it, and sometimes I'm like, no, F that guy, that he's using my machine and he's on his phone. And
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
um,
It's very because I call it my old programming, and it's formed a neural network that comes out and results in behavior where there is no consciousness involved in it. It was just the neural stimulus happened. The neural network was deeply grooved, and their output is the same. The behavior is the same.
yeah.
And when you try to change that, the new neural network that you're trying to create isn't as deeply grooved, and it's scratchy and uncomfortable, and you really have to stick at it. That's why I do my
Yeah,
practice
you have to practice. You have to
ev-
push. So like,
every morning of every day. I do these because otherwise, I tell people that I'm a quick study but a slow learner. It takes me a long time to develop a new neural network. But when you do, the music it plays is much sweeter than the one that you're
so
used
you have about, I think, what, 10 billion neurons in your brain,
to.
and every neuron has dendrites, like
Right.
off of it, connecting it to about 1,000 other neurons. And people believe, and I believe until somebody tells me otherwise, that it's the pattern of these connections, that determines the your consciousness, your awareness, your memory. And I believe that developing long-term behaviors, habits, attitudes is, you forced your brain to push, to a bunch of neurons have pushed out new little branches off the dendrites and
Yeah.
changed the pattern of connection.
I feel
That it's
that's exactly
hard,
what I'm
because
describing. Right.
imagine you're actually changing your brain's architecture at this micro level, where you're
Yeah.
focusing on stuff to the point where your brain is compelled, and it's expensive. Your brain's expensive, right? It eats
A
you have
lot
to,
of these resources. Yes.
right. And it takes a lot to make your brain, who wants to just say, like, stick in the old pattern because it's economically sound. It doesn't take as much as you're saying, nope, you've got to push these new connections.
But if you do the work, you can't control the stimulus, but you can control the response. You can
Well, you
become
can you
aware.
can you can run the same, like say you're a gymnast, you run the same routine through your brain 500 times, and your brain's like, all right, all right, all right. And like each time it like it's building the memory, literally physically building the
Yeah,
the knowledge of the routine.
absolutely. And you can train your body. And there's another thing that you can train your body to do, which is I learned through yoga practice, is that the body can calm the mind and the mind can calm the body. We try to think of terms of like intellect, physical, emotional, but the interconnectivity is the sweet spot of the solar system for life to spring up. And it's one that they're all related.
Yeah,
And so, I can change my mood. And one of the things I think of is just vibrations. You vibrate at a certain level, and everything vibrates. And so, there's a universal vibration. And sometimes when I can attune to it, that's when I feel most calm, cool, serene, safe, secure, and connected. And this vibration of mine, when I'm angry, agitated, or anxious, it's vibrating at an intensity that it's not good for me and it's not good for people around me. But with one deep breath, now since I've done it so often, this is confidence based on experience. I can calm myself down.
that's a good tool to have. My wife and I are at the age where occasionally our hearts decide to gallop,
Yes. Yes.
and like heart attack deaths, uh, time of day mostly is in the morning, because you wake up and you're and it hurts. Like you get up and you start moving around. So you go from 0 to walking around. Um, like my alarm is my phone, and
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I put it at a certain distance from the bed because I don't want the freaking phone radiation. I think it's not much, but I really don't want it next to my head for 8 hours.
Yeah.
So it goes off, and I have to jump up and turn it off. And that jumping up is sometimes enough to set my heart to an uncomfortable gallop where it takes like an hour to calm down.
Wow.
And I can luckily, I mean, some people with it's the beginnings of AFib, and some people with AFib, once it starts, it goes on for 48 hours, which is it's not super dangerous, but it's uncomfortable and disturbing. You know,
Yeah.
but I'm still at the point where
Passive.
I can help make it go away by like I sit down, I can beat the blood pressure machine by unbuttoning my pants
Mm-hmm.
and rolling my eyes and dropping my head back. I go, oh. And that's enough to drop my blood pressure, at least on the cuff, by like 10, 20 points.
Yeah.
Um, and plus I take a blood pressure pill. So I do all this stuff. So I don't have your tools of meditation, but I have other, tools that, and awareness is another thing. Like some
Awareness.
people aren't very transparent to themselves. They might feel like my wife worked with um, a woman years ago who came in every Monday wrecked after a weekend of substance abuse, basically, and was obviously physically um, just miserable, but didn't even realize it. She'd come in and be like, just like,
Right. Right.
like had no idea that she felt as bad as she did because she was just powering through it.
Right. I can relate. Yes. Um, so I think we should wrap the show up now.
Okay.
And Rick, it's been great but one last conversation about what happens when you die. And I don't think we have given a definitive answer. I don't think one was expected from the question, but we are both talking about our consciousness and the awareness, and that you can raise your consciousness, which produces an awareness, a raise in your awareness of your environment, but also what you're just touching on is you can turn it inwards and be more aware of your breath. When I get anxious, my breath gets more shallow and a little bit more rapid. And so that's why the deep breathing works for me. It's a very, very, like I can do the same thing in a doctor's office when they take the blood pressure in the beginning, it's one level. And I ask them to take it again at the end, and it's a completely lower level. And that's me being agitated when I'm anxious when I walk in. They call it the white coat phenomena. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so, but I've already managed to calm myself down during the examination or whatever the procedure is. And the outgoing me is different from the incoming me.
So if people have one takeaway from this, I'd say that we're pretty lucky to be living at the time we live now because we have more tools for understanding consciousness than ever before. You look at the ancient Greeks; they didn't know from the heart rate. I mean, maybe they had a rough
Yeah.
understanding of if I'm going into battle, my balls pull up and my heart seems to hammer, but they didn't have blood pressure cuffs. They didn't have any brain science. Like there is both information on the science level and then on the meditative,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah, and on the meditative side, there are people who have been studying this. There's a science and technology that's also been developed over the centuries. And why reinvent the wheel? So I plugged in. There's a school called Ananda. Pariyamani Ananda was a yogi, and they teach these practices. And I was just desperate enough to reach out for help, and they took their practices and tried them. And I definitely had contempt prior to investigation. I didn't think it would work.
Sure,
And
but also like there are enough different resources, enough different flavors that
yes,
if some practice you find annoying or you don't have the patience for it, there are other things you can look at. Like you're I look at stuff from the sciencey thing. How do I beat the blood pressure cuff?
right, right.
So that there are enough ways to go after
And
your kind.
find what works for you.
Yeah,
Yeah. And if it works for you, keep doing it. You know, don't do what I do. And I don't have to, what works for me may not work for you and vice versa. You know, to find what works for you and being open to looking for it because it's out there. Something will help you. And it's just, I always thought of it as that's why I got over my stubbornness and I just went to a facility that taught meditation, it taught yoga, it taught all of these things. And I had to be willing to learn. And for much of my life, I was not learning. I love to learn, but not about taking care of myself.
right, right. Yeah, sometimes you have to push your brain into the corner and force it to
Yeah.
freaking.
Yeah. It's ego versus spirituality is the way I've divided it into my mind. And I don't think of my ego as my enemy because I need it. It's my ally. But there's a time and a place for both. So thanks so much for coming and talking to me this morning, Rick.
Thank you
And
for
thank you for
having
the
me.
question. I forget who asked it, but thank that
And
person.
Naomi Comedo, which I don't know.
Okay.
All
All
right,
right. So hope to see you next week.
all right.
And
See you
we'll
then. Thank you.
continue on. Bye bye. Okay, Rick Rosner, Emmy Award nominated writer. And what we were talking about today is very interesting. And if you want to ask a question, write to us at info@airu.tv. And the questions that we're talking about today are in this book in a chapter called The God Question. I've also written another book called No Blame, No Shame, because you find out that if you're blaming others for your choices, you've got one finger pointing at them, but all the multiple fingers pointing back at you because it's up to you to do this work. And it is work, and I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's not. But with practice, repetition, at least for someone like me, I need to practice, need to do it. I do my repetitions every morning of every day. And if I don't do it, I notice it. So, and in any case, everyone has the power and potential to free themselves from addiction, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's workaholism, whether it's OCD, overeating, codependency. You know, I can go on because I've been in all these groups that have people representing all of these different anxieties, and the similarities are amazing of your experiences. But don't blame your parents, don't blame your upbringing, don't blame anyone else because it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens that's important. Not your experiences, it's your response to those experiences that you can control. So change the things that you can. And, you know, the answer, it's an inside job. Thanks for watching.